Today's webinar. We are focusing on the EU AI Act and the implications for you and for your business, given the various enforcement dates and various milestones that we've crossed and that we've passed. I'm joined by Alan Thornton, and we are going to basically move as quickly and as efficiently as possible through our webinar. We don't want to waste your time. We appreciate your time, how valuable it is. And so without further ado, I will actually, Alan, do you want to run through real quick just the contents, just to lay out the what we're going to cover in the over the next hour?
Yeah, no problem. So obviously we now are in an enforcement environment post August 2nd. So we will take a look at that first. We will then look at operationalizing Article 4, that literacy and training piece. We will take a look at evidence and rights defense, which is really, really important when building out your governance framework. Validating your governance setup to make sure that what you have is going to work for the regulators and what they expect. And then we'll take a brief look at some questions. If anybody has questions, please put them in the comment section of today's event. We should see them live and hopefully answer them at the end if we have time. Perfect. Ian, do you want to run through a 60,000 foot view
I will.
Before we get started?
If it's okay, I'm going to take about 2 minutes to do a quick, just let's locate ourselves and put it in context real quickly in terms of what the EU AI Act regulation and regulation overall means and the implications for us. So for the past couple of hundred years since the Industrial Revolution, basically every new technology that has arrived, it has landed, it disrupts our lives, and then we look to regulate once we understand what's at stake. And it's no different with any of the digital technologies, the internet or anything we've encountered. It's no different for when we first had cars on the road. It arrives, it disrupts, and then we work out, okay, how are we going to regulate this? What are the implications for it and for us? And that's the price really of adoption. I mean, when you think really the first car that we ever had on the road didn't have a seatbelt. In fact, seatbelts didn't arrive for about 50 years after the first cars. And it's a good example actually, because it isn't until we understand what's really at stake in the use of a technology or what's at risk, namely ourselves and our families, that we suddenly go, okay, well now it's time to regulate this and let's bring in things like seatbelts. And those regulations then very much become the cost of entry. And if an industry like the AI industry wants broader adoption of AI, they have to be crystal clear about what's at stake, and we have to be crystal clear that our regulation actually protects us, both personally and in our workplaces and in our companies and our economy and our society. We've been poor traditionally, you would say, if you look at social media over the past 15 years, we've been poor and late to the game in regulating it, and its impact has been pretty significant on the negative side. It's good to see that the EU has led the charge on this. And really, if you want to put this in context, think of the past 10 years with the GDPR, as the EU has kind of initially quite silently developed a set of rules as to how it is you need to operate digitally within Europe if you want to play in this particular park, as they say. And those GDPR regulations have now been adopted pretty much verbatim by many jurisdictions all around the world. And the good thing about the AI regulation, again, is EU at least moving early and coming earlier to the game rather than late. And also, I know from my discussions with our partners around the world that the EU AI Act is very much influencing and informing the AI regulation of many jurisdictions around the globe. So that's a good thing to see. The particular, I suppose, unique aspect of the Irish approach, while places like Germany and Denmark have single EU AI offices, which is a single point of contact, one consistent interpretation, one set of guidance, simple to navigate. And it's the responsibility then of that office to understand all of the industries that it governs. Ireland's approach has been different. The Irish government has decided to spread responsibility across 15 various regulatory bodies in Ireland. And that's going to provide some challenges for people, because at the end of the day, if you have 13 or 14 different regulators, you may actually come under the jurisdiction of several of them. And why do I say that? Let's say if you're an accountant, why aren't I under chartered accountants? Well, because the EU AI Act basically is based around your use, not about the industry you work in, but it's the use case of your actual application of it. I'll talk some more about this later on in the presentation. But as we get into the various aspects, I suppose what I want to make sure and make clear is that what we're proposing to you today is a solution that will meet all of your requirements under the EU AI Act, irrespective of which regulatory body that you actually fall under or fall foul of. Without further ado, let me head back to Alan, and I'll be jumping in and out over various slides. If you have any questions, please drop them into the comments, and we'll address them at the end, and we'll have time to chat and engage just through some comments and some questions. So, Alan, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. And I really appreciate you getting ahead of that explanation as to how Ireland is managing the EU AI Act through that distributed oversight mechanism, which is different to how other jurisdictions operate. So jumping straight in, as I said, we are in a regulation and enforcement environment post August 2nd. So we wanted to kind of focus on key areas that anybody who has attended the previous sessions will be a little bit familiar with, and then add some additional ones that are important now post August 2nd. And we'll talk a little bit about enforcement as well. So obviously, August 2nd marked a critical transition. Compliance shifted from foundational preparation to active whistleblower protections, individual compliance rights, strict assessment mandates, documentation, literacy training, and all of the above. So you can see in the first square, or rectangle, I should say, on the left, the baseline obligations. So existing core rules must still be maintained as active compliance priorities. So that is your Article 4 AI literacy piece, mandatory training for staff operating AI systems within your organization. Articles 9 to 15, the high risk management, data quality oversight, and logging requirements are there. Obviously, the enforcement deadline on high risk systems is a little bit over the horizon, December 2027, but that will catch up with people very, very quickly. And then Article 50, transparency, AI interaction alerts, watermarking, labeling, disclosures, things like that around GPAI, general purpose artificial intelligence systems, like your Gemini outputs, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it may be. So what's new post August 2nd? New regulatory mandates are now fully live and enforceable across the European Union. One of the key ones is Article 88 around whistleblowers. So safeguards for employees reporting compliance breaches must be in place, and there's actually a portal where people can go and blow the whistle if they feel they need to on an organization directly with the AI office in Europe. Then there is Article 85 and 86, which focuses on rights, the right to lodge a complaint and request automated explanations. So if you run a tool or a system that has an AI making decisions on people's CVs or their credit score or whatever it may be, there is actually now a portal and a mechanism live through the AI office where people can lodge those complaints and request information on how automated decisions were made. So that will feed back into your own governance structure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And then Article 27, which is the fundamental rights impact assessment. So a lot of people will be familiar with DPIAs, data protection impact assessments, whereas this is fundamental rights. It's slightly changed, but it's very similar. So if you're used to DPIAs or work with them already, the FRIAs should be simple enough for you to undertake, but they are now part of the enforcement package and required for a lot of different use cases inside organizations. And then obviously penalties and fines on the right-hand side. We talk about this a lot, but there is obviously severe financial exposure if you fail to meet compliance standards. You've got a 35 million or 7% of global annual turnover top-level fine for violating the Article 5 prohibited AI practices. 15 million or 3% of global annual turnover for high-risk GPAI or transparency failures. And then the sneaky one that not a lot of people are aware of, but is catching people out now in this enforcement environment, is that 7.5 million or 1% of global annual turnover fine for supplying misleading info to regulators. And when that can happen is if a request comes in from a regulator, an auditor, whoever it may be, and you don't have anything in place. You don't have an AI governance structure in place. You can't show that you've got literacy training at least started, for each member of staff who's using AI in your organization, and you panic. You start trying to build out that compliance piece, that log. You start trying to track things. You're going to have bad dates. You won't have the appropriate human oversight people associated to each use case. you can be fined for that if you make a submission in a panic, essentially, with the €7.5 million. So it is very, very severe. And getting on top of this now, if you haven't, is the best time. So the AI Act reality, it applies to businesses today as of August 2nd. So you don't need to be a multinational to be in scope. If your team uses AI, Article 4's AI literacy obligations already apply. And your customers and partners are starting to ask. We will actually look at some of the questions in a minute. So the Article 4 duty is live. Literacy obligations have been active since February 2025, and they're kind of looking at them more seriously now, post August 2nd. And the EU's approach is to have like a best effort to AI literacy training for individuals within your organization. So they want to see that your receptionist is getting the level of training that they need, and you're also aware that your finance team is getting the level of training that they need for the systems that they use, and that the leadership team, is getting the level of training that they need to understand regulations and, how deployments affect the public, the business, the staff members within it. They want to see that you're making the best effort to train, the relevant levels and roles within your organization. So that's essentially where they are right now. Regulators are enforcing, so national supervisory authorities across Europe are fully operational, national penalty structures are active, and the European AI Office is actively monitoring market compliance. So the last time we spoke about this in session 2, I had mentioned there was 60 staff in the office. There is now 145 staff in the AI office dedicated to enacting and overseeing the EU AI Act and all of the member nations across the European Union and their individual EU offices. Just to note, for example, if you're in France, their regulator has highlighted they will look at recruitment and sports first. If you're in Germany, they're going to look at worker monitoring and workplace AI. If you're in Spain, they're looking at the gig economy. And as Ian mentioned, Ireland has a kind of fragmented scattergun approach, which is called distributed oversight, where we have 15 bodies or specific watchdogs, which will handle their unique domains. So like the central bank looks after finance, for example. And as Ian highlighted, that can create an issue for people just to be aware of. So a single AI HR tool, for example, can have joint oversight from data, equality, safety, teams and benchmarks. So it's really important to understand that Ireland is taking a kind of a scattergun approach where you could be asked from multiple angles to produce information around your AI use cases, because it is specifically about the use case. How is it affecting data? How is it affecting equality? And we have different oversight branches there that look after each of those alongside the AI office, which is the central hub point. So deployers are also in scope, applies to any business using AI, from one-person teams to enterprises. With new whistleblower protections active, unmonitored shadow AI creates immediate internal and external exposure. So people have the ability now to blow the whistle on things they see from outside an organization, but also inside of it. If people aren't getting trained, if a governance structure isn't set up, they can blow the whistle, and there's official channels to do that now with the EU. So risks you can't ignore. What are the stakes post August 2nd? I'll try and get through these as fast as possible. So operational stoppage is number one. So regulators can order immediate suspension or recall of an AI system if you can't, show people are trained and you have that governance framework in place. So the business impact would obviously be a disruption to core revenue generating product lines potentially. The second then is insider exposure, which we've highlighted a few times so far. So employees have statutory protections to report non-compliance. So enforcement no longer relies solely on external audits. It can happen from inside your organization as well. The third thing then is individual rights. So customers gain enforceable rights to lodge formal complaints. Like I said, that is live now from August 2nd. There is a portal available with the EU AI Office. So what is the impact? Obviously, that opens vectors for collective redress and investigations through consumers lodging complaints. 4 then is deal friction. Enterprise buyers integrate AI compliance into due diligence. I'm seeing this a lot. There is talk about ISO 42001 coming as well, which is about AI management systems. Although it is not mandatory, I believe from 2027 it may be an expectation to any future deals or contracts. So obviously the business impact there, non-compliance blocks high value sales and any potential mergers or acquisitions if you are partaking in those. So why organizations certify, what questions are being asked and how can AI certified, secure your business and help you, look after your people, your product and your future essentially. So customers and clients, how is AI impacting my data and decisions? Direct answer needed for customer inquiries, fulfilling Article 50 transparency rules and Article 86 explanation rights. You need to have some level of training in place for people when this question gets asked. That's what AI certified can help with. Board and leadership, can we prove operational compliance if queried today? So you want to be able to produce complete audit trails and assurance records ready for executive risk reviews and board oversight if it is required. So again, there is a lightweight software solution as part of the AI certified training package that takes care of that for you. Regulators and authorities are asking, show us your training records, logs, and your assessments. So you need to have a centralized tamper-evident evidence package available immediately on demand. So that is not going to be a spreadsheet. It's not going to be a standard IT log. It's going to be something like an SHA 256 hash, or it's going to be a blockchain or something like that, kind of like a regulatory records black box, essentially. Then enterprise and procurement, where is your AI Act compliance pack? Can you send it over to us? We might want to renew a contract. Please get us that so we can continue to work with you. You would need to be able to produce pre-packaged documentation that satisfies vendor security reviews and accelerates the B2B sales cycle. So really, really important for most businesses to be able to say, we have our training in place, we have our core governance framework in place. Here it is, good to go. We can export that quickly and send it over to you. And then your own people, obviously, really, really, really important, especially with that internal risk of whistleblowers or people kind of calling out bad practices or not being compliant. So what are our AI guardrails and are we trained properly? So that solves the Article 4 literacy mandate, apologies, and eliminates Article 88 whistleblower exposure by giving staff clear role-based guidance. So that is what AI certified can help you with moving forward. So the solution we're offering, certified staff, defined share of your team earns an accredited AI qualification, evidence, governance software, lightweight platform with tamper-evident logging, keeping training and evidence renewal ready, which is fantastic. And then an independent QA piece, structured review, verifies your measures are genuine. The step that makes the badge means something. So, you can really stand over it, which is fantastic. To add a little bit of detail to each of those steps before I hand over to Ian, solution step 1 is around AI literacy, people and competency. So a tailored training approach is kind of what I spoke about. Different individuals in your organization are operating in different roles at different levels, and they will have different training requirements that need to be met. So Article 4 mandates that any workforce interacting with AI on your behalf possesses a verified level of competency calibrated explicitly to their functional duties. So the receptionist using ChatGPT to spit out emails needs a different level of training to the HR manager who's running a tool to make decisions on people's data and information. So the execution gap, the compliance burden scales with system access. So implementing isolated training pathways without central operational oversight or imposing complex standards lacking practical execution creates systemic gaps and can be a real problem. So something to really pay attention to inside your organization. And then that unified governance framework by systematically mapping responsibilities, organizations build stable compliance foundations and deep confidence. So once you get that training layer in place, people understand how governance works, why they need to be trained, what the regulations mean, and how they affect their day-to-day work when they use AI. So how do we translate the duty? 100% of AI engaged staff complete a comprehensive role-specific baseline literacy module. Key roles, all named users, overseers, and system deployers earn an officially accredited qualification. And then things are logged. So every certification and renewal milestone is secure and maintained in one single platform. So really, really handy. Step 2 then is documentation and evidence. So with individual rights, to explanations about decisions and complaints, now active standard IT logs and spreadsheets, as I alluded to, essentially crumble under scrutiny and will not stand up to any sort of request from a regulator or an auditor. So you need to have tamper evidence logs and an audit ready paper trail. So that is covered by Article 12 of the Act itself. It's really, really important, as we mentioned, that training records and mapping are the kind of key foundation to your governance framework. Who completed what training and when, alongside who oversees deployments and AI use cases across the organization. Different people are responsible for different use cases. You've got your fundamental rights impact assessment integration, depending on the tools that you are using. You need to be able to, auto capture data quality, human oversight rules, and risk assessments before deployments. Really, really important that you have your F4IA in place inside your governance framework before you deploy a tool or a system. Then instant audit response, really, really helpful and goes a long way when someone comes knocking on the door. So you need instant access to evidence when regulators or affected individuals demand decision explanations and how your AI use cases work or may have worked in the past. You can have a complaint from a historical position. And that's why it's really, really important to start building up those frameworks now. I had a CEO of a company in Ireland, and they allowed me to share this on LinkedIn. I screenshotted their message, so thank you to them for me to be able to put this out there. But it went a bit viral. They had a request from a client overseas, outside of Ireland, that wanted their documentation on August 3rd, which is obviously a bank holiday in Ireland. So it was a bit cruel that the deadline was August 2nd for Irish companies. And they were panicking. They had no staff in. They didn't really know anything about this, and they needed to get something done. So that was an SME business on August 2nd, panicking about a request that had come in around enforcement on the weekend it happened. So this is happening now. It's not a kind of theoretical situation. It's not something to be put off. It is something to definitely build into your team as soon as possible. And you're just in a stronger position. Get your team trained, get your governance framework in place, and you can have confidence moving forward. So how the solution delivers from documentation and evidence perspective. There's cryptographic immutability. So the SHA-256 hashing is inside the lightweight software. It provides those tamper-evident logs. So records cannot be retroactively altered, which is fantastic. So if someone tries to cheat the system or claim that something didn't happen and it has been properly logged in the past, you can never cover it up, basically. The system will always show you the exact information, and that's really good from a business confidence perspective. You want to be able to do that for your clients, even when they make a complaint or request, some sort of documentation. One-click procurement bundles are inside. Create complete compliance evidence packs for enterprise buyers and external auditors, and then zero spreadsheet friction. So continuous background logging of policies, role changes, and system updates without manual overhead. That's what the system helps. There's a human input element, but it tracks everything as it happens once those inputs are made. And like I said, it can be an easy situation to get your documentation and evidence in place. Step 3, opera. I'm going to need some water. Apologies. So the independent QA piece, which really adds weight to the badge and your confidence in your setup, your training, and your systems. So self-assessment is actually a completely valid and standard path under the EU AI Act. However, self-assessing doesn't mean doing it in isolation. So you certainly need your documentation, role mapping, and controls, to hold up under scrutiny. And Article 43 covers self-assessment. It does say that it is a valid approach. You can self-assess, no problem, but you are completely liable for the outputs that you produce. So obviously, having that verified piece through someone like AI Certified is very, very helpful. But just to note that self-assessing is an option that you can take. You don't have to be verified or audited. You can, under Article 43, run a self-assessment yourself. So for step 3, the independent QA, direct hands-on collaboration. So myself, I will work with you to review your setup, sanity check your role classifications, and ensure no regulatory blind spots remain. Defensible self-assessments, as we said, so stress test your internal controls against real-world enforcement expectations before clients, auditors, or authorities ask, and then have those audit-ready outputs. So produce clean, human or machine-readable transparency cards and evidence packages ready for immediate export as soon as a request comes in. It's really, really important. I can't stress that enough. So just to summarize briefly, training and literacy, role relevant, get everybody trained up to the required standard. That then allows you to build out a confident foundation from an AI governance perspective, where you can get your logging in place, track your documentation, produce evidence whenever you need it. And that is something you will see now as I pass over to Ian, that AI Certified can support you with. So the key takeaway from today's session, and I'll speak again at the end with the Q&A, following these steps ensures your core AI literacy and governance is practical, complete, and rock solid. So with that, I would like to hand back to Ian.
Sorry, just unmuting myself there. Thanks, Alan. So basically, if I can just pause for a second and step back again from the detail just for a minute, and just talk practically for a minute for what exactly it means to companies, and what are the challenges that they're facing, especially with this distributed regulation model in Ireland at the moment. If you look at the basic requirements of the Act, and you're talking about things like, the great thing about this Act is that it starts with training. That's the first thing. That's the one thing I suppose I welcomed with open arms when I was reading this Act as it evolved and I saw the various aspects of it. I welcomed really completely the fact that training was the first starting point for this, and it's the first logical place to actually start, is that make sure that people understand what AI literacy is, what AI compliance is, and start there with your training point for everyone who is either engaged with or responsible for using AI within your company. That's crucial. Within that, then you need to actually look at then having a mechanism for recording both your training in terms of what it does, and then also listing all of the AI systems that you use, deciding whether you're a deployer or a provider, looking at your use cases, classifying your risk. And that ultimately is going to point you towards your regulator. And we'll say, for example, there are industries in Ireland, if you look at accountancy right now, if you're in the accountancy end of the world, if you're doing things like using AI to sift through CVs, the regulator there is Workplace Relations Commission. If you are using any AI tools in data that you're processing, well, that's the Data Protection Commission. If you're advising a lender, for example, on AI credit scoring or something like that, that's now the Bank of Ireland, Central Bank of Ireland, as the regulating body for that. So even if you have a chatbot on your own website, for example, and you're making suggestions to people or answering questions, that's the Consumer Protection Agency. So how, as an accountancy firm, are you supposed to understand who you appeal to or who you apply to or who you're supposed to meet? That's why a system of training, a system of recording is crucial for this, so that you can produce the information that any of the regulatory bodies need from one core system, and not maintain multiple systems for multiple regulators. And it is something that we're going to hear a lot more about in the coming months, about the fact that people are actually in one use case possibly falling across multiple regulators. And by the way, the interesting thing about that is that Chartered Accountants Ireland are not a regulating body. Even though they are the body for accountancy, they are not considered a regulating authority for AI. Another industry, engineering, for example, if you're taking on an engineering project of any kind, you could have, for example, if your project touches the grid, the electricity grid, well, that's the Commission for Regulation of Utilities. If you're screening staff as to who can work on a particular site, that's the Workplace Relations Commission. If you have personal data being recorded anywhere, that's Data Protection Commissioner. So, and as an industry, Engineering Ireland is not the regulatory body. So the government has, I think, set itself up with a serious challenge here. And so what we've been looking at from the very start of this is we need a solution that ticks the box, no matter what use case you have, no matter what risk level you have. You want to get your people trained, and you want to get a system in place that will record, as Alan was saying, in a tamper-proof way. And guys, this is something new for most Irish businesses, by the way. Most Irish businesses are thrilled about having records in a CRM system or in an accounting system or in a spreadsheet. This is not about a spreadsheet that you can just suddenly knock together to meet the requirements. This is something that you actually have to lock in and secure and cannot be changed after a specific date. What was the date on which your staff were trained? To what level? It's a locked, secure record that cannot be changed. So what we're proposing with for from AI Certified is that we create a route to validation, to certification, so that you become an AI certified enterprise, so that you meet and you comply with the requirements of the EU AI Act. And it's absolutely crucial that you do that. If you jump onto the next slide there, Alan, I'll show you just the breakdown of it in terms of how we structure this. So first of all, everything in column one there depends on your organization size. So if you're a small business and you have up to 50 staff, your requirement could be to have 2 key people or 4 key people or 6 key people trained. And there's modes, our offering around this allows you to either self-assess, I'm going to do the training ourselves online, or you have the verified approach, which means that there's an evidence review and an interview and record sampling, and we actually validate and verify that you have in place what you need. And then there's also an audit view, which means that we're looking at everything from your chain of custody documentation, your cryptographic record integrity, and your compliance and your alignment with ISO 42001. Most people we found to date focus on the verified because that meets the requirements of the EU AI Act and gets them there with some guidance and some direction and some help and some validation and some quality assurance. And then depending on the size and scale of your business, how far you want to go, we can scale up and stuff like that. But the crucial thing here is you need an integrated solution that meets the requirements of the EU AI Act. You need to have clarity that your people are being trained to the right level, that the right people are being trained. You need a system which walks you through all of your declarations, all of your risk assessment, all of your use cases, and ultimately identifies your regulator. And that system then can produce the documentation you need, whether that is for your board, whether it's for customers, whether it's a regulator, whether it's for staff. And at the end of the day, what this system and this approach will give you is an AI certified enterprise badge and part of a community and a growing community of companies that are saying, we're AI compliant. Thanks very much. We've got that sorted and we have the systems in place to be able to actually do it. So that's it in a nutshell. So what I want to do then, and that basically those are I suppose probably the key people that you want to be able to present that to. If you take, for example, what Alan was saying, more and more you're going to see insurance companies calling and saying, well, your insurance does not cover your compliance with AI, and so we need to see your documentation. Your customers are going to be calling because their tender documents, for example, as you're producing government tenders, are going to come out and say, are you compliant with the EU AI Act, and submit the documentation around that. Your staff, similarly, because at the end of the day, there's whistleblower legislation in there for a reason, so that people aren't doing stupid things with AI. And your staff have to be assured that your processes and your systems are in place so that there's responsible use of AI. And ultimately, the risk at board level is something that you need to be aware of as well. So what I want to do then is I want to throw it open, and we have some questions have come in already, and I'm just going to run through them real quick, Alan, and we can pick them off, and I'll give them to you actually. Let's see now. How does EU AI Act impact IT outsourcing vendors, particularly those providing AI development or implementation services? Alan, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, no problem. So there's kind of from a compliance perspective, there's two avenues. There's internal use cases and there's third party vendor use cases for AI systems, and it doesn't matter whether it's IT or any industry or product or service, but specifically for IT, what I'm about to say will work across industries. Vendors and suppliers of third-party outsourced IT systems will need to run their own kind of EU AI Act internal compliance piece, where they've trained up the individuals who are producing the AI tools that they are passing on then to a client or whoever it may be. So they need to be trained themselves. They need to potentially run through a conformity assessment, depending on what the IT solution is that they provide. A conformity assessment is generally a high risk piece of paperwork that you need to complete, and it can take from 6 to 18 months to do that, depending on your system. So this is really important for, let's say, IT teams developing cybersecurity software, HR software, finance software, whatever it may be, and then deploying that downstream. They will need to complete a conformity assessment to continue to have market access beyond December 2027. And the clients that they work with are going to start asking those questions back up the vendor supply chain or to the partner network at large. They'll start asking, well, what's your compliance piece? Do you have a CE mark? If you require one, can you produce an evidence pack and let us know what you're doing, how you're building out your AI system, where relevant, depending on the use case. If you cannot provide that information, kind of as Ian said, we alluded to earlier on in the presentation, they just won't work with you anymore. And the supplier of the software or the IT outsourced team, it's not actually on them. Once they deploy the system out to a client in the real world, how the client uses it, it's on them to perform risk assessments and be compliant with however they actually use that system. So someone like HubSpot, just a great example, they could be compliant. They provide an internal AI that can scan your CRM, what decisions does it make. They can be compliant with their own in-house setup and situation. But as soon as they send it to you, if you tweak that AI or get it to make decisions on CVs or whatever, it becomes a high-risk use case inside your organization. And whatever HubSpot have done, you can't rely on. You can just request their information and then produce your own compliance piece around training on how we're using HubSpot's AI inside the system, or any third-party supplier, regardless of the industry. So I know that can be a little bit vague, but that core principle applies to any third-party vendor and supplier. They need to run their own internal training and governance framework setup. They need to make sure that they comply, if they're a high-risk system, to the EU AI Act's database of high-risk systems. Basically, you pass a conformity test and get a CE mark to be able to deploy moving forward. And then essentially those teams can help their clients with compliance. That's a value-add position. So if you are an IT outsource company that works with various clients, if you want to help them understand how your system works and provide them with some tweaks or edits to how the AI tool can be used and how that changes its risk categorization, it could go from limited risk to high risk. That's a really good value-add position to be in. But essentially, the EU AI Act has a core principle that affects everyone the same way. Get your people trained, build out your compliance framework, and have a conversation with your partners and your supply chain about policy, contracts, and governance going forward. It's going to become a big conversation point in businesses all across the world. And if you aren't experiencing that already, you probably will be in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully that answers the question. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but yeah, I think that's it.
Super. So I'm just going to grab another one here then. Biggest problem, sorry, where was it here? Yes, could you clarify, Solmas, thank you. Could you clarify whether companies are required to deliver AI literacy training to employees to comply with the AI Act? And are there any minimum training standards or recommended accreditation certification schemes that organizations should follow? So the one area where it isn't specific is exactly what level people are to be certified. It says that you have a responsibility, and basically that comes out as it means that you have a documented role-based response to a live, what is a legal duty at the end of the day. So what we've done is we've defined a program, a literacy program, covering AI governance and the ethics of AI and the regulation of AI. And the topics that it covers are fairness and transparency in AI, regulations and compliance requirements, audit, oversight and accountability, AI risks and responsible use, designing governance and frameworks, and organizational policies for AI use. So what we have is a comprehensive literacy program for people. And at the end of the day, the question that you're asked is not what level are you certified to? The question you're asked by the regulator is, what did you do? What steps did you take to ensure that you found a course or provided a program that met the requirements. And so what you can do is we can provide you then with, as part of the system, here are the steps we took, here's what we trained people in, here's what we taught them, and here's the level to which they're accredited or qualified. So it's absolutely crucial. And so that's available. Guys, we can forward that to you after the webinar if anybody would like to get the details of the actual curriculum of what we're teaching people, and the certifications that's available to you around that. So you have to be able to present a credible case to the regulatory bodies about what it is you have taught people at what role and at what level. And it's very much over to yourself. And that's why we're providing supporting programs around this. And we can give you more information afterwards. I'm going to run on because I just want to make sure that we get through all of the questions here. That was IT outsourcing, companies are required to deliver literacy. Good. Randall, thank you. Randall Glick, biggest problem I've seen from my students and other attendees of AI learning is a confusion around what needs to be complied with and what actually means on a day-to-day basis for them. Alan, do you want to just go back to we'll say the most basic compliance aspects of this real quick, just to reiterate in a couple of sentences what it means for a business in terms of their compliance?
Yeah, no problem. So to strip it all the way back, individuals who use AI in an organization in any role need that basic level of literacy training as a starting point. The next thing then is to log the use cases. So a quick example, Gemini creates graphics for presentations that go out to the public. We log that use case, have its associated purpose and description put in place, assign a human to that use case. So that's really important. That's a key compliance piece. So not only will people be trained, they need to assign human overseers to the use cases within their organization. And then when you build out that use case inventory, essentially, you must have, as I mentioned, a tamper-evident log that can just be one clicked out as evidence when anybody requests it. So what needs to be complied with is training, recording your use cases and having a human assigned to them and creating that evidence log in the background. That's the kind of basics of it.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Let's see, just want to run through a couple more. What expected is of compliance? Wow, Milos, that's a detailed question there. I don't think we're going to be able to cover it. There's two very detailed ones. Let's go back to your first one. For a company that is not developing AI models, but is actively using third-party generative AI tools across marketing, e-commerce, and customer service, what would you consider the minimum practical compliance framework that should already be in place? I'd point you to your last answer there, Alan, in that sense, in that you have to have training, you have to be able to log your use, you have to describe your risk level, and you have to have it recorded in a verifiable method and verifiable mode. So yeah, I'm going to skip your second one there, Milos, and we can take it off.
Ian, I know Milos on LinkedIn, so he can send me the question directly.
Fantastic, brilliant stuff. So, folks, I'm conscious of time. It's 12:42. That's a 45-minute webinar. So, I think if we don't have any other questions, then in the queue, we're going to leave it at that. If there's any follow up on the last slide there, Alan, if you want to jump to, there you go. If anybody would like to talk to us in more detail, if anyone would like to talk about the training that we provide and the certification and the content of the course, if anyone would like to actually see, it's a very light touch little software platform that we use to be able to record and capture all of your requirements, please do talk to us and we can set up a 20-minute demo for you. Also, just to, at the end there, Amy asked that we have a survey in the third last comment there from Amy Elliott. If people wouldn't mind filling out the survey on the webinar, we'd really appreciate it. And Milos has come back in with one more question. What are the most common mistakes you see companies making when using generative AI in marketing and customer communications, especially around transparency, data protection, and human oversight? Do you want to grab that on it?
Yeah, so the most common mistake is not, after August 2nd, not attaching a transparency label to their outputs. So obviously that's kind of step 4 of the compliance piece around Article 50 and the EU AI Act, because obviously you want training, use cases logged, audit trail set up, and then the transparency label will be associated to the use case that you set up. But that is the key, or like the number one problem that I see. And a great example that's in the public at the moment is Claude has just said they're going to watermark their text outputs. So anybody can find out if something was generated by Claude going forwards. And the digital watermark transparency label will be mandatory from December 2026. So the physical labels that you see on a graphic that's AI generated or whatever, that's enforced now. But then that digital watermark piece is coming online in December 2026. And you can see people like Claude already getting ahead of it. So if you're not putting transparency labels on your use cases, if you're not tracking your use cases, someone like Claude is going to catch you out post December 2026. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I'm seeing from people is thinking that they can just kind of hide their AI use in the background and not really provide labels. So yeah, that would be the number one mistake I see, people not labeling their content.
Brilliant stuff. I just want to take one last question because it's a crucial one, actually. Thank you, Mikhail, for it. And Mikhail says, I believe there was an amendment to EU AI Act recently watering down the training requirement somewhat to something like making your best efforts and demonstrating steps towards developing skills versus hard training requirements. Is this true or false? It is true and false at the same time. So let me just clarify this clearly. The law was softened 3 weeks ago, and it now asks you to support AI literacy and not guarantee it. Okay, but here's the thing: the obligation is on the measures that you took. So it's not on the course, it's on the program. So the obligation, again, still rests with you. So if the Workplace Relations Commission or the Data Protection Commission asks you, what did you do? Just answer it by saying, well, we softened it, isn't really going to get you by. And by the way, the more important thing here is that it's not the answer you give the regulator that's as important. It's the answer that you give to a procurement process. It's the answer you give to a client questionnaire. It's the answer that you give to any organization that wants to work with you, buy from you. So just saying, oh yeah, we gave the lads a webinar and they were fine, and that's all that's needed, it's not enough. You have to actually go beyond just a softened approach, and you have to adopt a meaningful, credible standard of literacy and point to a certification framework that you can map that to. And don't think that people will be happy with, oh yeah, our staff did a webinar. That softening was on the certification end, but not on your obligation end to actually have made a meaningful attempt at it. So I just want to clarify that also. So I think that's it. A LinkedIn user, complexity seems to be Europe's signature. Thanks for the seminar. Unfortunately, it's a decent piece of regulation. I'll be dead honest with you. The rubber hits the road on how it's deployed. And I think that Ireland will come in for some criticism again from the EU and from our EU partners for a distributed regulatory approach. And I think it is something that will weaken the impact of the AI regulation in Ireland and cause more overhead and more confusion. And I don't think that was the right way to go. They still set up a central AI office, but they just didn't give it all of the regulatory clout that it should have had. And I will be making a submission from AI Certified to the government and to the regulatory office that they should centralise regulation in Ireland under one body and not distribute it like this. But thank you, LinkedIn user, a point well made. So folks, if there's no other questions, that's fantastic. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming online. The webinar will be available to review afterwards, and we're available on LinkedIn or at becomeaicertified.com if you'd like to continue the conversation. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you.